Long-time viewers of the channel will know that I'm somewhat fond of the Brucesploitation subgenre. That strange period of cinema history where a world-renowned martial arts expert died tragically young, and the broad response to this was, "Oh, that's awful." Okay, let's make 100+ ultra-low budget movies where we basically say he either faked his death or is some kind of superhero mixing in bad taste references to problematic aspects of his personal life. Oh, and let's throw in some footage of his actual open casket funeral too for good measure. Oh, and don't spend too much money. Yeah, this is gonna be a real nice tribute. It's a bizarre subgenre, to say the least, splintering off into every possible genre you can think of, and depending on the budget and inclination of the filmmakers, the tenuous links to Bruce Lee could almost be described as transparent for just how thin they really were. And fairly recently, Severin Films decided to curate several of these movies, including my all-time favourite Brucesploitation Bay, The Dragon Lives Again, a thing that I literally thought would never happen, into a rock-solid box set dubbed The Game of Clones. Well, I grabbed that box set, and today we're going to be taking a look at the film that not only helped name this box set, but its sister documentary as well, 1980's The Clones of Bruce Lee. A film that's reputation preceded it, and I kinda wish it hadn't. The plot of the film opens in the middle of a crisis. World-famous martial artist Bruce Lee has collapsed and is facing certain death. Luckily, medics were fast on the scene, and after rushing him into the operating theatre, they begin to try and save the legend. But unfortunately, after a couple of attempts, they realise he's just way too far gone, and Bruce Lee sadly dies on the operating table. It's at this point that we're introduced to Colin, from the FBI. A man who, for the majority of this film's runtime, will at almost every point be referred to as Colin, from the FBI. So Colin, from the FBI, is in active communication with a chap by the name of Professor Lucas, who's working on a quite exciting project. A project that may be about to bear fruit. The pair arrive at the hospital, and the professor pulls out a syringe and draws a full tube of Bruce's blood. While the world learns about Lee's tragic death and broadcasts footage of his real, actual funeral, alongside photos of his corpse from the open casket, Lucas begins his masterwork, an attempt to clone the great Kung Fu master himself. And he succeeds, cloning 3 whole Bruce Lees using some kind of kitchen appliance-based technology. Further still, once the clones are fully formed and almost ready to get to work, the professor uses a brainwashing device he's also developed, directing the clones to be entirely loyal to him and to only follow his instructions above any and all other orders. With that out of the way, the Lees begin an intense training regime, starting with the basics and eventually learning all of the great fighting principles, to the point that they almost become as good as the original. And that's where the real work for these clones begins. See, Colin, from the FBI, and Lawrence had an agreement. The feds would leave Lawrence alone to develop his experiments and offer some degree of coverage and protection, but in exchange the FBI wanted Bruce Lee's clones to essentially work for them as unpaid assassins and spies. And now that they're ready to start kicking arse and taking names, Colin, from the FBI, has their first set of missions to run. The first involves Bruce Clone Number 1, as he's tasked with learning about and halting a mass secret gold smuggling operation being fronted as a film production company headed by producer Chai Lo. To do this, Bruce 1 heads over to the company's studios and auditions to be the lead action star in one of their planned upcoming movies. The studio love him, commenting on how good he is, but Chai doesn't like the vibe this Bruce wannabe is giving off, and basically tells his team that he wants this guy taken out of the picture. At first, they consider standard murder, but when that doesn't quite go to plan, they hatch the perfect plan. When they take him out on the next location shoot, they'll write in a scene where he's held up at gunpoint, but at the last moment they'll swap out the prop gun for a real one and then accidentally shoot him to death. Oh, no fucking way. No. Well, with this being the movies, art doesn't imitate real life, and the Bruce clone manages to both not get murdered, finds where the gold is being smuggled from, and after a mass set of fight sequences across the land, warehouse and boat, Bruce and Chai go toe-to-toe and Bruce completes his mission. Once Colin, from the FBI, is satisfied that the job's been done well, Bruce's 2 and 3 are up next. And for them, it's a spot of espionage, and a trip to Thailand, Bangkok specifically, to investigate and eliminate a mad scientist by the name of Dr. Nye. The Doctor is, to the best of the FBI's knowledge, creating and distributing narcotics in a local community, and the Bruces have been tasked with finding out what he's supplying, stopping it, and taking the Doctor out of the picture. When they get to Bangkok, they're met by another member of the FBI called Chuck, who tells them that the mission starts formally in a day or two and that, for now, they should just enjoy the sights and sounds of Bangkok. What does that involve exactly? Well, Bruce 2 decides to take a nap after the long trip, but Bruce 3 wants to go to the beach. So, Chuck arranges for them to visit a gorgeous sandy beach. And while the pair are wandering down the sands wearing nothing but their budgie smugglers and shades, a gratuitous number of naked ladies burst out of the ocean and begin chasing a weedy-looking guy. Then there's a lot of boob massaging and other stuff I can't really show here. It's the most blatant suddenly breasts boobling for the lads that I have seen in a very long time. Anyway, that evening on returning home, Bruce 3 heads to bed, only to find another naked woman in there, who at first attempts to seduce him, then attempts to murder him, and then it's revealed that she's working for Nye. After some light interrogation, the woman reveals the location of Nye's compound, and the Bruces begin to infiltrate it. They eventually stumble on the drugs lab and Dr. Nye, who reveals his ultimate deadly scheme: a serum that can transform your average human bloke into a flexible metal soldier. Bronze to be specific. And his plan is to make a bronze man army and basically take over the world. So, nothing too grand. With that, it's down to the Bruces to stop the serum and defeat Dr. Nye. But what'll become of Bruce 1? And is Professor Lawrence entirely as philanthropic as he seems? Well, I'm not going to tell you because I think I've already given away too much, but all this and more will be answered if you check out The Clones of Bruce Lee. And on the surface, this reads as a quite thrilling and strange little exploitation flick. Indeed, it's been cited as the Plan 9 from outer space of Brucesploitation films. But I do rather feel that its outrageous, wacky weirdness has been somewhat over-exaggerated, because the reality is, while it does have some genuinely fun and weird moments, they are somewhat few and far between. The script itself is very much a mixed bag. In its favour, the film opens fantastically. It's strange, jaw-dropping at times, and pretty much sets up all the elements of what makes this film unique in a concise, fun and interesting way that kind of feels like a mashup of traditional martial arts movies and a B-movie sci-fi flick from the early 70s. However, once the first act is cleared and we get into the clone missions, the film really starts to lose momentum and practically grinds to a halt by midway through the second act. The problem itself is fairly simple. It's the fight sequences. Now, any good martial arts movie needs a good handful of decent fight sequences to help perk the audience up, showcase the skills of the on-screen talent, and give the director something to really sink their teeth into in terms of choreography and how best to showcase it. Unfortunately, the fight scenes in this film are hindered by two problems. One being that the fight choreography in and of itself isn't that great, it's oversimplistic with no real wow moments that I could see. It's also badly framed at times, meaning you can clearly see the lack of contact with the punches and kicks. But also, these fight scenes go on for bloody ages, to the point that you may as well go and grab a drink or make a sandwich or something when one comes on, because basically after watching the fight for a couple of minutes, you've seen the entire fight and the remaining 5 to 8 minutes of on-screen fighting is just drab, lifeless filler. And I'm not even saying that the performers are bad, for the most part they're okay. But the bad framing combined with the lack of creative fight choreography and only one scene involving weapon play essentially took huge chunks out of the second and third acts into glacial territories. And while the film really does try to rev back up with the introduction of the Bronze Warriors and a later plot twist in the third act, which I won't spoil here, it's all way too little too late, and I found myself clock watching by 20 minutes off the end. With the only added insult to injury being that the film doesn't really resolve in an effective way. It ties up a couple of plot threads and then just abruptly stops. Which isn't unusual for both martial arts films and Brucesploitation specifically, but it really didn't win any favours with me here either. The film also kinda gets hobbled act structure-wise by the sudden decision to turn the second act effectively into an anthology. It means the first act ends on a strong note, and then the second act starts its way through 2.5 plot lines before dumping us out into a very short 15 to 20 minute third act finale that feels like it's missing a reel's worth of context and wrap up. The transitions between the acts are heavy-handed and clunky, and there's no clear rhyme or reason as to when these acts even start or finish. The characters are all incredibly basic and one-note. The clone Bruces get almost no character development and barely even say a line through the whole runtime. While the villains feel like cartoon villains from one of those Saturday morning cartoons that quietly gets cancelled 3 episodes in. They're just kind of dull for cartoonish villains. They don't animate very well, their dialogue is poor, and their character arcs are really underdeveloped. It comes to something when the extras end up having more to do with the plot than the villains. Equally, the dialogue isn't the best in the world. It's minimalist to the point that you actually start to wonder if the scriptwriter even knew how to write, and what dialogue is here is overly basic and over-explanatory, to the point of feeling like I had audio description on. It's such a shame really, because story-wise, this could have been an eccentric and fun little piece. You have 3 Bruce Lees running around and a mad scientist with cloning powers. And instead we spend 5 minutes watching them take a boat ride and 10 minutes watching them fake punch Bolo Young. The script was written by Kwang-Shin Wu. Unsurprisingly, this is his only listed writing credit, and it looks like he didn't do anything else. On directing duties, the production is split between Hong Kong and South Korea. We have Ki Nam Nam and Joseph Valencia. Ki has 61 directing credits in a career spanning from 1972 until 2010. They mainly seem to have worked in martial arts, comedies and dramas, though I didn't see any that stood out of particular note. As for Joseph, he has 25 directing credits between 1977 and 1988, and somewhat comfortingly, his output seems to have been predominantly martial arts movies, and in particular Brucesploitation flicks. I'd say the guy knew what he was doing, but I wasn't a huge fan of this, so I don't know. On the direction front, it's fine, but again, it's far from great. In terms of being able to corral a production, I feel that both Ki and Joseph just about did the job fine enough, but as production was split over 2 long-distance locations, it meant that putting that personalised touch on how the film looked and felt was kind of out of the question. I mean, the last thing you want is 2 directors who can't directly communicate shooting the film in 2 different creative styles and then trying to piece it all together in post. It'd be a nightmare. So, we get vanilla. Essentially just quasi-competent filmmaking that's trying to just show us what's happening in a non-offensive, non-distinct way. And while, much like the script, I will say this film has at least a couple of moments that stood out for me, on the whole, I found it to be kind of bleh. Direction of the cast is marginally better. It feels like the team worked closely with the cast to get the right level of animation and vibe from them in terms of physicality and line delivery. They clearly marked out what space the actors had to work with, as they relished the opportunity to explore the set space and mess with props. But again, given this was a mutual direction production, it means they couldn't really do anything that helped bring that cast direction to life in a way that would have really truly been effective. As mentioned, the fight choreography is laboured, oversimplistic and not particularly handled all that well. While there are glimpses of more intricate arm and leg work, for the most part it's just simple and basically coordinated punches and kicks with the occasional acrobatics thrown into the mix. The direction visually for these is usually wide shots that occasionally cut in. They're quite slow in terms of the fight sequences themselves, and they don't mask the no-contact punches and kicks particularly well either, with multiple moments where you clearly see the actors' hands and feet miss their targets by a full 6 inches at least. It's a dreary set of fights, with only 1, maybe 2 scenes being just above average in my opinion. As for the Cine, it's equally dreary. The shots inside Professor Lawrence's lab are about as good as it gets, and the only reason that's the case is because they use funky coloured mood lighting and have vintage props. But other than that, it's flat Cine that does follow the rule of thirds at least, but is largely uninspiring. There's no power, no force or energy behind the shots. They feel like we're just observing the events from a park bench with a sandwich, rather than getting pumped to see the next big action sequence. It's so low energy in places, not helped either by the fairly pedestrian edit that's just cutting when it absolutely needs to rather than when the film needs it to. The low use of cohesive colours keeps things fairly monotone visually. Barring the lab sequences and maybe one or two moments in Dr. Nye's lab, this is a very drab watch, which is a real shame. As for the performances, again, I'm just kind of mid on the whole thing. Dragon Lee is probably the best part of this movie, and he really seems to throw himself into the part. He had the most moments that I enjoyed in this thing. Bolo Yeung also seems to be having a fine enough time, but does have a distinct low energy to his fight choreography and broader performance here, which was a bit disappointing. But the rest of the cast are just so devoid of charisma or energy. Everyone's just kind of standing around going through the motions, and while they do utilise the space and props well enough, their actual physical performances and facial animation, despite a stab at an attempt, is just kind of flat. And finally, the soundtrack. It's 50% music stolen from a royalty-free sound library and 50% music stolen from hit films from 1975 to 1980, including, but not limited to, Rocky, Enter the Dragon and The Warriors. They sound like arse, they're badly edited and they crash in and out of the film like someone's intentionally trying to take a wrecking ball to it. The only thing I loved about it was the absolute randomness of it all and the balls of the production to think they could steal Gonna Fly now and not have people call them out on it. Outside of that, the English voice cast are kind of, sort of, okay. Given most of them usually sound like the cast of the Carry On films just having a go at dubbing something, here, it's a much more subdued experience. Normally I moan when they vocalise too cartoony, but here, where that kind of energy was really needed, they couldn't be arsed. So we get fairly generic, half-decent performances that do the job but don't go nearly far enough. The Clones of Bruce Lee was released on VHS with heavy cuts by the BBFC in 1981 by a company I've never heard of called Hokushin. The cuts mainly removed any use of weaponry and some of the more extensive fight scenes. While it wouldn't get a DVD release in the UK after this, as far as I can see, an Australian company called CEM Media did release the film on DVD in 2004. And copies of that were available on UK sites like Amazon through the 2000s. It wasn't until 2024 that the film would see another release when Severin Films would put it out on shiny Blu-ray. And honestly, this is the best the film has looked by far. It's still a little rough and ready in places, having been sourced from two European 35mm prints, but hey, it's crisp, sharp, and the colours have never looked better. Extras include a commentary track, interviews with some of the cast and crew, a theatrical trailer, and an introduction to the film that really helps add some context and nuggets of trivia. Honestly, I've been seriously impressed by the Game of Clones box set, and if you even have a passing interest in Brucesploitation history, this is an absolute must-own if you can get your hands on it. The Clones of Bruce Lee was a bit of a letdown for me, unfortunately. I do think maybe a rewatch will slightly improve my thoughts on it, but it's such a slow and dreary production that even the occasional nugget of eccentric weirdness doesn't really make up for what is essentially a bit of a slog. It's definitely worth checking out if you're on a Brucesploitation binge, but if you're a die-hard martial arts fan, this'll probably disappoint more than delight. Possibly one to avoid ultimately, I feel.